Hello, and welcome to this training webinar on reporting options within SAP Business One. My name is Ketan Solanki, and for the next hour or so, together with my colleague John Haley, we'll be running through the following topics. So firstly, we'll be covering SQL query writing in SAP, followed by crystal reports, and then John will take over and run through the advanced reporting options that are available, and then we'll have a question and answer session right at the end. So first topic is SQL queries. So typically queries are used within SAP for ad hoc type reporting, for read-only type reports. These are generally created using the query generator. We can save these queries, but there is no formatting. There's just sort of, raw data that can be exported to Excel. Now, there are two options in terms of writing queries. You've got the query generator and the query visit. Now, the query visit is a step-by-step. It guides you through a step-by-step process of writing a query, and the system creates the SQL statements in the background. But the user doesn't really need SQL syntax knowledge. The other option is to use the query generator, which also has a user-friendly interface, but you can see the SQL statement being built as you are working through the process of writing the query. Do note that both these tools are for extracting data from the database only, so select statements only. Do not use these to update data back into SAP. So before we actually start looking at writing a query, let's have a look at how we find out where the data that we're after is stored within SAP. So I'm going to now switch screens to SAP. So when you open up a particular screen, and let's say I'm going to open up the item master data, and when you hover your mouse over a field, you can find out which table and which field the data is stored within the database. Now, the way to do this is, firstly, you've got to make sure that the setting under View, System Information is checked. And once you've got that, you can then put your mouse and you'll see on the bottom left corner in the status bar area, the name of the table and the field name. So down here. So if I go back to the item code field, I can see that the table name is OITM and the field name is item code. If I move my mouse and put it on the next field, I can see that the description field is item name. Still the same table, but item name. If I go into the stock data tab, and if I say place my mouse over the warehouse stock on hand, you can see now the table name is OITW, which is a different table, and the field name is on hand. Okay, so now that we know how to find where the data is, let's have a look at how we can write a query. So under Tools, Queries, and Query Generator, you open it up and there's the Query Generator screen. Now, on the right side, you've got all the different elements of a typical SQL query statement. So the first box is the select statement. So that's where you grab the fields that you want to output in your query. The next box is the from. So this is where you define which table the data is coming from. So just earlier we were looking at the item master data screen, and we could see that the table was OITM. So this is where that would go. You have the where clause. So this is your filter on the output of the query. So for example, you might want to just return items that belong to a particular item group. So this is where you use the where clause. It is important that if you've got a large database that you just don't return all data and you do some filtering, otherwise the query might take a long time to run and you might even affect the performance of the system. The next one is the sort by. So this is just, whether you want to sort the data in ascending or descending manner. And finally, you've got the group by clause, which you can use the data that's coming out. So you might want to just return the max value for a particular field, or you may want to sum up all the quantities and return one line for all of that. So we'll have a look at examples of all of this as we work through some of the scenarios. So coming back on the right side here, so to pick a table for reporting purposes, you can simply, if you know the name of the table, you can simply type it in this field here. So for example, the item master table was OITM. So if I just typed in OITM and hit the tab key, I've got the list of all the database fields that are in this table. If I want to remove the table, I can hit the X button, and that will get rid of the table. If I hit the tab key without typing anything in here, I get a listing of all the database table names, or all the tables within the database. And then, I can scroll down and look at various things. I can type in here OITM, and I can see that it's the items table. Or if I wanted to search by description, if I didn't know the name, if I wanted to see what all the related tables were, I can double-click on the description field and then type in item. And you can see there's a whole heap of tables relating to the item. And there's bins, serial number related, price related. All of those tables are here. And you also note that with the item, we got the OITM, which is the item master table. But we also have a table called AITM, which is the item history table. So whenever you go in and do the view change log on an item, the information on the history of the item is stored in AITM. So I'm going to pick the OITM table again. And let's say we just want to return the item code, the item description, and the item group. So I simply go in, double-click on the fields that I want to include. So I'll double-click on the item code, the item name, and the item group. And then to run the query, I just hit the execute button. And here's my output. Okay, it's just a simple listing. I've got the item number, the item description. However, if you look at the item group column, it's giving me a number. And what I really want is the description of the item group. So if I drill into the item master, I can see the item group is actually JB printers, not 101. So what this indicates to me is that the actual information for the item group name is stored in a different table. We've just got a reference to it in the OITM table. So what I can do is now link that other table. So I've executed the query, and I can see the complete select statement up here. If I was, an advanced SQL query writer, then I would have been able to adjust or modify this query here. But I can hit cancel and come back to the original query generator view. And what I can do now is I can add the item group table to my queries. Sorry, I shouldn't have done that. Let me just go back to where we were. And I want to add the item group table. Now, how I know that there is a related table for the item group? The actual item group field is in a slightly different font. You can see that it's in a bolder font compared to, let's say, the item code. So to link it up, the easiest way would be to, even without knowing the name of that table, I can just click on the field until I get a box. So similar to how you do drag and relate, you got the box around it, and then you just drop it onto the left side where the list of tables that are already part of the query are listed. So what's happened here? There we go. I dragged it and dropped it, and you'll notice immediately the from section now has a bit more information. So it's got the OITM, which is the first table we had. It also has a table called OITW, and then it's got this statement in between saying I'm joining this table on the field ITMS group code, right? So it automatically does that for you. You don't have to know about what the join is, but this is just sort of explaining to you what this has done. So it's created the join for you. Now I can select the item group name field in my query. And then I click execute, and here's my output. Now I've got the item group code as well as the item group name. Now from here, let's say I wanted to put a filter. So now I'm going to the where clause, and let's say I want to put a filter for the item group name. So I go into the where box, I double click on the item group name, and then I've got to say equals, and then let's say it was JB printers. Now, if I'm going to put a filter based on some sort of a text field, I need to put quotes around it. So I put a single quote at the start and a single quote at the end. And then I click execute, and I've got the query results now just showing JB printers. Now, what if I wanted the user to specify the item group? So to be able to select which group they want to return. And we can also do that. Now, to do that, we have to open up this conditions section. So I click on that, and now I've got all the variables I can add, and then the conditions on which I can add the variables. So I already had my field item group name. I could have then gone into the conditions area, double-clicked on equal, and then add the first variable. Okay. Now if I click execute, I've got a selection screen. I can click on the choose from list and select one of the item groups. Click OK, and I've got the same result. Or I could have executed and picked a different item group, and then I'd get a different list of results. Now the next box here, the sort by. So let's say the output, I want to sort it by the item description. So I can then go in, select that field, and then click execute again. Select the group, click OK, and now the output's sorted by the item description. And you can see that as I've added various elements to my query, in the query preview, the actual query has sort of built itself up. Now, once you've saved this, so you can save the query. So let's save it first. So I can click on the save button, and then it opens up the query manager window, and then from here I could create a new category for my queries. So I can say new cat and add that, and so now I've got my new category, and then I can give it a name. and click on Save. So now I can recall this query whenever I want on demand. I'll just go into the Query Manager, which is up here, or you could go through Tools, Queries, and Query Manager. Expand on New Category, that's the category I'm interested in, but there's other categories that you can expand on and run those reports or queries, but I'll run this one, select my group, and you got the result. Now once you've saved the query, you can't go back to the Query Generator view. So the Query Generator view is only available while you're developing the query. Once you've closed it, you cannot come back to it based on the query you've saved. So it's very important to finalize everything before you close this off. Okay, so that's to write a simple query with some filtering as well as some sorting. Now let's have a look at a different example. So now we're going to look at one where we're going to also use the group by clause, and the one I'm going to show now is where we do a total invoice by customer. Okay, so the end result of the query we're trying to write is we're going to have the customer code, the customer name, and a total invoice value over a date range. So firstly, let's find out where the data is coming from. So this is the AR invoice. So if I hover my mouse, I can see that the table name is OINV, and we've got the card code, the card name. There's various date fields here. Now you'll also notice that sometimes when you put the mouse over a field, it doesn't tell you which database table or field it is coming from. So for example, the total field. If I put my mouse here, I can't see it. Now the reason is that on the form display, this field is showing data that is a combination of multiple fields in the database, being the currency of the total and the total itself. That information is stored in two different fields, hence you don't see the field reference here. However, if you once you know the table, so let's go and open up the query generator, and we know it's OINV. Once you've opened up the table, you can see all the fields, and you can see there's a currency column, there's a total column, and so on. So I'm going to start off by writing a listing of all invoices over a date range, and then we'll modify that to get our summary. So start off with document number, the document date, the customer number, the customer name, and a doc total. So let's just execute this first. So that's just a complete listing. But what we're really after is a date filter, and we're also interested in seeing one line per customer, not multiple lines. So let's get our filter in place first. So where, and the filter is based on date, so where the document date, and we want the user to be able to enter the parameter. So I'm going to say where the document date is between, and the first variable and the second variable. Now, there are a lot of pretty good courses online, as well as texts or textbooks that give you training on how to write a good query, or how to write queries altogether. So I'm not trying to show you how to write queries in much detail, but what we're trying to show you here is that you can quite simply, with just a few clicks, extract data that you need out of SAP. So here's my filter. And if I execute that now, it's asking me to enter the posting date range. So let's say 01/01/15 to 31/12/15, and OK. And so, yeah, we've got our output. We've got one line per invoice within that date range. And now let's look at how we can group that or summarize that so we get a total per customer. Now, to do that, I need to get rid of the columns I don't need anymore. So I'm going to get rid of the document number and the document date. And I'm going to say, well, I want to group by the customer code and the customer name, because that's what I want to summarize. And I want to get a total of the doc total. Now, if I just try to execute this now, I'll get an error message down here. It's telling me that the column doc total is invalid. And the message has disappeared, but not to worry. Is invalid in the select list because it's not contained in an aggregate function or the group by clause. What it's basically saying to me is either I've got to put the doc total into my group by area, or I've got to put some sort of aggregate function on the doc total. So there's various aggregate functions available. So you can do a sum, you can do an average, you can do a min, you can do a max, and so on. And you'd find this in, if you went into detailed training material for SQL. But I'm interested in doing a sum. So what I did was typed in sum and put a bracket around the field that I'm summing. And then I want to give it a column name, so I'm just going to say total. If I execute now, 15, 12, 15. And now I've got one line per customer with a total value. Just another little trick or tip, when you've got your query output, if you wanted to get a sum of a numeric column, you can just hold the control key and then click on the header for that column. So if I hold the control key and click, I've got a total down here now. And just like before, we can save this query away if I wanted to run it again. You can also, you notice this button here called Copy Data. You can click on that, and then you could open up Excel. And right-click and paste. And you've got the data straight into Excel. Okay, so that's a bit about writing some simple queries to grab data quickly out of the system. Now, if you wanted to get a bit more advanced, if you wanted more training, you could obviously talk to your consultant and get him out to run some training for you. But what would make sense is if you wanted to do that sort of a training is identify some queries or some reports that you need out of the system and then get them out and get them to show you how they do it and do it with them. That would give you a bit more training and insight into how we do it. Okay, so that covers the topic on SAP queries. Now let's have a look at writing crystal reports. So I'm not sure if you're aware or not, but if you're not, you know now that for every installation of SAP Business One, you get one free developer license for crystal reports. Now this crystal reports is a SAP Business One OEM version, and it's the license is only to be used with SAP Business One. So if you wanted to write reports onto other databases that aren't SAP Business One, then you really need to get a proper Crystal license. So typically the Crystal Reports writer is installed on the server where your SAP and SQL components are. If you wanted to find out whether it's installed on your server, you can connect in, and then if you just went in through the Start menu and just typed in Crystal, as you start typing, you'll see Crystal Reports for SAP Business One. Now, the other way of finding out whether you've got it or not is if you, let's say, if you had a layout that was already defined in Crystal. So, for example, if you went into AR invoice, and I've got an invoice layout that's in Crystal, I can click on the pencil, the layout designer, and click on Manage Layout, and I can see all the different layouts that I might have and whether they're type Crystal or PLD. So here's one that's a Crystal report. Now if I wanted to modify that layout, so let's firstly have a look at what it looks like. So I go into an existing invoice, and I just done a quick preview, and there's the output. So if I wanted to amend this invoice, provided I've got Crystal Reports installed on the system where I'm doing this, I can just click on Edit, and it's opened up the report in the Crystal Report writer. So from here, you can then pick up additional columns, move things around, so you can just click on a field and shift it around, move it somewhere else, and so on. You can also add additional columns. So on the right side here, you've got the Field Explorer. You can expand on that, and you can see all the fields that are part of this particular report, predefined. And if I, let's say, wanted to grab the customer's phone number, so I know that the customer data is in the OCRD table, and if I wanted the customer's phone number, there it is, phone number 1, I could grab that and drop it into my report area and resize it. I can even change the font, make it bold, give it a label, so I can put a text field in. So there's the insert text object. And I might call that phone. And let's say I was happy with that. That's the change I wanted to do. Now, I can now save this back into SAP purely by going through this menu option here called Add-ins. And then I'm going to save it as a different layout. If I clicked on Save, it will just save it and overwrite my current layout. But if I wanted to maintain that and just make sure I perfect that, I can go Save As. And I might just have to log in again. I'll put my SAP credentials. And then what will happen is I'll get a screen up which shows me all the different layouts and where do I want to save this. We're looking for the invoice layout, so we're going to find INV invoice items, and I can call this UK version 5 and OK. So now it's writing it back to the database, and it's done it. If I come back into SAP, and if I went File, Preview Layout, and I can select my version 4, And there's the phone field that I had added. It's obviously cutting off, so I'll have to adjust it a bit more and get things done like so. But that's how you can edit or modify an existing layout. Now, if you had to write a report from scratch, let's have a look at how you'd go about doing that. So I'm going to close that screen and that screen, and I'm going to close that as well. So I've got Crystal Reports open, and I'm going to go File, New, Standard Report. And now I can, if I've already got an existing connection, it'll appear as such. Otherwise, you can create a new connection, and there'd be a connection item called SAP Business One, and you get the SAP login screen. Now, you need to know the SQL version or HANA version for that matter that you're running. You need to know which database you're going to connect to. You need to have an SAP login as well as a database level login. So if you're running SQL, then the database user is generally SA. And if you're running HANA, the database user is generally system. So I've got an existing connection here. There it is. And I'll put in my credentials of the manager account and the database account. And once I've made the connection, I can then expand on here. I can see this thing called B1 tables. And let's say I want to do a report that shows me open purchase order lines by supplier. That's the report I'm trying to do. So I expand on purchasing, and I'm interested in purchase orders. And I've done the system information thing, and I know that the purchase order header is OPOR, and the purchase order lines is POR1. So I can double click on those, and that pulls it across to the right side. Then from here, it's showing me in a visual manner the link between the two tables. Now SAP already knows what the link between the two tables is, and it's done it for you. And then basically you've got the two tables, and you've got to select the fields that you would like to output from those. So we'd like to grab the document number, the date, the delivery date, the supplier code, the supplier name. And then at the detail level, I want to grab the item code, the item description, the open quantity. So I mean, we might have already had partial receipts. So I'm interested in not the quantity, but the open quantity, as well as the unit price. So I've got my fields to display. And then I can also group the data. Now, I probably want to see it grouped by the customer code, the supplier code. And I probably also want to see it by the purchase order. So I'm going to get a listing where it's going to show me all the open purchase orders for a supplier, and then also then split by each open purchase order. Okay, so I've done my grouping. And then this is showing me, well, what do I want to summarize this data by? So it's basically by default picked any numeric field and said, well, because there's all these fields that have a number, you probably want to sum them up. Well, I'm actually not interested in doing that, so I can basically remove all the summarization using these buttons. I've got next. Now I've got to do some filtering. So what I've done so far is I've just selected the purchase order header and purchase order lines table. But in reality, I just want open purchase order lines, which means I need to do some sort of a filter for that. And the filter I'm selecting is on the purchase order line, there's a field called line status and is equal to O for open. Okay, so now I've got my filter. I go next, and then I could pick a nice template that already comes within SAP. And click finish. So I've got a report. I mean, it doesn't look so great. It requires a bit of formatting now. So firstly, I guess I've got too much data to fit in a portrait mode. So I've got to go landscape. So I can go File, Page Setup, and change to landscape. And then I should really go into the design view and then try and do some adjustments. I can make the customer code a little smaller. I can make the document number is probably okay. I can probably also remove, so if you look at the data, we've got the customer code up here, I mean the supplier code up here, but then we also got it repeating on lines, and we don't really need that. So I can get rid of that information on the detail level. So I'm going to get rid of customer code from there. I'm going to get rid of customer name from there. Actually, I don't want to get rid of the customer name. I'm going to move the customer name to the top section, so it's displayed together with my customer code. And I can also then make that field a bit smaller and copy the formatting from that field to the customer name. So I can see that it's got a certain font type and a font size. I could just grab the format painter, and then I can click it on the card name, and now it's got the same formatting. Go back into preview, and I can see that information now being reflected. I don't really need the document number on the line level, so I can get rid of that. Then I can start moving things around a little bit. So I've got my date and due date. I can move them to the left. I can put the item code and item description up. I can move the description up, make the field wider. I can move and make some of these other fields wider. Grab my open quantity, grab my price up. Let's have a look at this now. Starting to take shape a bit. I can see that the date format doesn't look right. So I can right-click on those, format them, go into the date and time section and customize it so that it's just a date field. And I probably need to put some header or titles for these other columns. So I could copy the item code, description, and paste it back in. And rename this as description. Make it wider. Do it again for quantity. And do it again for price. Okay, it's starting to take a bit more shape now. But what if I also wanted to get a total value of the open purchase order line? So I got to put a formula now. So I can go in on the right side here, right click on formulas, go new, and I can call that total. And then I can grab a couple of columns from my report, so open quantity and price, and multiply them together. Once I've done that, I can then grab that field, put it into my report. I don't really need that header. And then I can give that column a name. So looking back here now, I've got the supplier code, supplier name, and then I've got my purchase order number, and then the lines that are open on that purchase order. And I can go to the next page and I can see further information. Now, the next thing I want to do is put a filter. I need to do a runtime selection. So when I run this report, I want to select which suppliers I wish to do it for. Now, there's a concept with SAP so that when you run this report, it will give you a nice looking SAP selection, and there's a particular syntax you need to use, which is basically a SQL statement, so that you get the nice selection. Okay, so that's my selection. I can give it a prompt to say select supplier, and I can make it an optional prompt, and I can say allow multiple values. So, okay, I've got my selection now, and what I need to do is I need to assign that through the selection expert. I need to put the filter on the card code equal to, and then select my filter. Click OK. And then if I preview it now, it's asking me for a selection. I can put that in and get the data through there. So the last thing I need to do here is I need to just find out a good supplier code. So here's one. Let me run this again. The last thing I want to do is put a drill down onto this onto the customer code, so that when this report runs inside SAP, the user can click on the drill down arrow and get into this purchase order from there. So to do that, I'm going to insert a picture, and I've already got a picture of a drill down arrow. I'm just going to put that onto my report. And then I've just got to put a formula against it. So there's a format graphic, hyperlink, and it's a website. And I go into the formula section, and I've already got this formula predefined. Now there's a document that we're going to share with you after this. It's called How to Work with Crystal Reports in SAP Business One, and a lot of these things are defined in here for you to run through yourself. So I'm going to save that and click OK. So my report's pretty much done now. And I can now go and save this back into SAP as a report, and I'm going to call it my purchase order report. Click OK. Looks like it's saving it away. It's done it. And if I come back into SAP, I can then find this report under Administration, Setup, General, Report and Layout Manager. It's in the Lost Reports section. And if I run the report, I get a runtime parameter. I can select, in this case, I've got customers and suppliers, but I'm really, something wrong with my filter. Let me just check the parameter. I needed to filter on suppliers, not customers. And let's just save this back again. As version 2. And that's done it. Refresh. Oh, I mean, I can run this one that I've done previously. If I run the report, I can select the suppliers. And when the output comes out, you can then click on the orange arrows and get back to the purchase order. Okay, so we've added some drill downs within SAP, as well as we've done a selection that allows us to pick from data within SAP. So that concludes this part of the presentation. We will be sending you the Crystal reports that we've used as part of this presentation, as well as the queries we've written, and the PDF document that I showed you earlier in relation to Crystal reports in SAP. Now I'm going to hand it over to John Haley to talk about the reporting, more advanced reporting options. Over to you, John.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So before we dive into the next couple of points, I'm just going to emphasize that today this is just a very brief taste of what lives in this area. As you can see, the majority of the time we've dedicated to what we've just seen. We have some upcoming webinars here at MicroChannel that are going to be addressing this kind of a topic in much more depth. Or, of course, you can always reach out to us for some direct advice or demonstrations if that's of interest. So, that said, for the purposes of today and taking into account the time limits, let's consider that advanced reporting is a generalization for a variety of tools and actions that do one or more of the kinds of things that we see on screen here at the moment. And they are, first and foremost, to blend information together from one or hopefully more than one place. And in today's context, that's usually going to mean taking data that's collected or stored outside of SAP B1 and adding it to your SAP B1 data. And this is one of the single most powerful ways to unlock insight within a business. And done right, it represents a really genuinely transformative opportunity for a business. What else does it mean? Well, BI analytics is about asking the next question. Reporting is an ideal way to get specific answers to specific questions. So, what's in stock right now, for example? And sometimes that's exactly what you need to know, and it's all you need to know. But what about when it isn't? When you want to know why something's out of stock, or why there's so much of something in stock, or when it'll be back in stock, or whatever it might be. That's where BI and analytics can make answering the next question much simpler and faster. In fact, done right, BI analytics doesn't just answer the next question, it actively encourages your users to ask that next question and not just to settle for the superficial answer, which segues fairly nicely into this next point. Sometimes you're not sure quite what that next or even that first question actually is. So, in the previous example, maybe you look at the stock report and something doesn't look right. Perhaps we seem to be holding more of a particular item than you'd expect, and why? Well, where do you start? Do you go to the supplier lead time report and check there? Is it because the supplier is notoriously slow or has frequent out of stocks? Do you go to the customer order history and see that you've got a particular customer whose order patterns are lumpy, but for whom DIFOT's really important, so you're holding inventory for them? Or is it one of 100 other possible causes? And when you don't quite know where to look, traditional reporting can be very frustrating at best. But a good BI and analytics solution provides so many different answers and so many different ways of looking at those answers in a single place that finding the needle in the haystack becomes immensely simpler. It's also about empowering a data-driven mindset. Data-driven decision-making, it's a popular buzzword these days, and it's a topic that I'm personally passionate about and I love to discuss. But, what is it and how do businesses get there? But the quick description is it's about encouraging your team to let their brains make their decision, not their guts, because let's face it, the stomach is a notoriously bad decision maker. It's about encouraging people to make decisions with their brains, and to do that, you need to make it easy for them to do it. And you need to be able to empirically prove the validity of those decisions. Well-deployed BI analytics solutions do exactly that. They make it easier to decide things based on fact and reason, which then allows you to unleash your personal insight from a starting point of known fact. And this next one here is where some of our best success stories are really based. And when you can provide meaningful and accessible information to your business partners, and I mean suppliers, I mean customers, but I mean anyone that you're engaged with in your business, then you really bring them a lot closer to yourself, and you start making yourself an indispensable partner and not just another basic and interchangeable transactional partner. And finally, and this is both under and overestimated depending on where your mindset is, BI and analytics is an opportunity to bust queues for a reporting team and to turn what is almost always a source of frustration into quite a source of glory for your reporting team. So many businesses spend so much time, effort and money chasing the right reports. A well-deployed BI analytics solution is an opportunity to not just improve your business, but to dramatically reduce frustration and to create genuine excitement within the business again. And if we can move on to the next slide, I'm going to talk about, well, what does that actually mean? Next slide, if possible. Thank you. What does BI analytics look like? Well, the answer is that it looks like a lot of different things depending on what you need and honestly where you are on your BI journey. To start with, it might look like what we've been talking about today. For some people, the kinds of reporting we've looked at today, they're enough, and they're always going to be enough, or certainly for quite a long time, and that's perfectly okay, of course. But it can also look like what we might call enterprise reporting. Word, Excel, PowerPoint, PDF, HTML, on schedule or on demand, out to scores or hundreds or thousands or more of recipients. And again, those recipients can be internal, but they can be your customers and business partners as well. It's reporting on steroids. It can also mean guided analytics, as we like to call it. And this is a catch-all term for on-screen analysis of a defined but still very broad pool of data. It's a way of letting your users play within a pool of information that's been collected and curated for them, but where they can ask and answer a huge variety of different questions. You might describe it as drillable and filterable, but contained. But that even undersells it to some extent. But more and more, it really means self-service. End users, and maybe skilled with data and maybe not, taking the base dashboards and the base pools of data that they've been given and building their own answers to questions that you haven't even thought to ask as a management team or an IT team or a report creation team. It's an attractive vision, but it's also one that's quite easy to dismiss as sales talk. And whilst complicated data is always going to be complicated data, modern tools and approaches can really make data much more accessible to more people than has ever before been possible. And combined with a world that's is hungrier than ever for data and users who are becoming more adept at using data, self-service can be a reality far more easily than you might think. And of course that leads to a whole different challenge, the questions of governance and security within a self-service data world. But there are solutions here too. And if we just move on to the next one, as I alluded to earlier as well, it can mean what we call embedded analytics. This is analytics blended seamlessly into your software and into your websites. Software is most commonly with a T, but that's okay. This means sitting within your B1 environment and working with advanced analysis tools from right where you take the actions that your analysis is suggesting. So it becomes pervasive mindset of data and an immediate action on what that data tells you to do. It means plugging your analysis tools into your website, be they public-facing or be they protected portals for your key partners. Embedded analytics is where you can achieve really incredible transformations within your business. And if you like these kinds of things, it's pretty exciting stuff, to be honest. Now on to the next slide, if we may. And we haven't really talked product yet. Everything so far has been use case and concept, and that's obviously by choice, because one of the things that we think that is really important about MicroChannel's BI analytics practice, it's right there in the name. We're a BI and analytics practice, not a product practice. Obviously, we need products and tools to deliver our solutions, but we do also understand that not one size fits all, and perhaps more so than anywhere in this space. The variables include, and this is not all of them either, the actual use case. How many people are going to be using the solution and from where? How complicated is your data? And this is a bit of a topic all by itself. If you look on screen at the moment, you can see there's a nice little rule of thumb that we use for what type of data you have based on a little matrix of how much data do you have and from where does it come. Another variable is budget, because let's face it, money matters, and an investment that makes sense for one company might not make sense for another, even with the most ironclad business case. And finally, the appetite for BI within a business. Some people want to become data-driven. Some already are and want to take the next steps into concepts like predictive, Internet of Things, machine learning, all the other great buzzwords that play in this space. And some just want to take the first step from reporting into analysis or BI. And the answer of what's the right tool set can be different for each of these situations. But, as I said, these are tool sets. So if we can move on to the next slide. What you see on screen in just a moment, here we are, is the core of our business intelligence and analytics tool set. And this is not exhaustive, but it is the core. Naturally, we've got SAP BobJ and BobJ on our business objects on HANA. Powerful, comprehensive, and naturally closely bound to SAP B1. We also implement and support the various components of Microsoft's BI stack, and the heart of that is Power BI and the Cortana Intelligence Suite. And then we've got a handful of pure play BI vendors whose portfolios are entirely focused on BI and analytics. Solver BI 360 is an excellent enterprise performance management tool, or CPM tool, with tight links into SAP B1. Focus is a lighter but still powerful data visualization engine, and it's got some solid self-service capabilities. And Click offers a comprehensive and powerful platform for really all aspects of BI analytics that stands up solidly to any alternative. And so which is right? Well, that's where the BI analytics team here can help you. Is your data big? Is it diverse? Is it simple? Is it complex? What's your appetite for analytics? What's your desire to become data-driven? What's your current footprint in this space? These are the kinds of things that we work through with you, and together we'll build the right kind of solution. So reach out to us and let's talk. I can be reached via email, john.haley@microchannel.com.au, or just call into one of our offices and ask for me. My team and I, or of course you can come in through your B1 consulting team, we're always happy to talk and to help.